Time to open up your brain locks, think outside of the box. Welcome to the Paradise Paradox. So the other day I interviewed a fellow named Peter, and he has a YouTube channel named 434, and it's all about communication with these spirits or extraterrestrial entities or mushroom elves who contact him while he's under the influence of magic mushrooms or during meditation. I can definitely relate to Peter because I've had a bunch of experiences which are quite similar to his. Now, he chose the name 434 because that's something that has personal significance to him. It's the center of a certain synchronicity which has been involved in his life many times, and I'll put a link to the video so you can hear more about that later. 434 is a kind of magical formula. It spells out love, joy, and hope. And those are the things, whenever Peter sees that, he knows he has to refocus on those things. Now, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about his network of people who have had these experiences. We talked about near-death experiences, the nature of good and evil, and all kinds of stuff. Now, I encourage you to check out Peter's channel, 434. I'll put the link in the description. Thank you so much. Let's get into it. Cool, so I'd like to welcome you, Mr. 434, Mr. Love, Joy, Hope. How are you?
Name is Peter.
We could go with that as well.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to talk to you. So, yeah, you were just saying some things about the legalization of psychedelics, and you were saying Canada is in talks to possibly legalize psychedelics.
Yes, and I'm obviously only talking about what I heard on one of the Joe Rogan's podcasts. Dennis McKenna was talking about something that he knows that's happening in the Canadian government. So it's just Chinese whispers, but who knows? Who knows?
I see. Okay, so Dennis McKenna probably has a lot of connections with people who are talking about that kind of stuff all around the world. So if he says
exactly,
it's not just a rumor.
No, he's the kind of person that he is, and the type of connections that he has. When he says something, it actually makes sense. And he's also, from those 3 hours I listened to him, he sounds very rational. So I can imagine he wouldn't be just talking about something that is just, up in the air. We'll see, because I've read recently that there are some other countries who were thinking about it. John Hopkins University recently started doing medical trials and some scientific research on magic mushrooms. So I think something's happening. Yeah.
Well, I have heard of a few things talking about making magic mushrooms legal, especially in a therapeutic context, and also with MDMA. I think people are going to work with that.
Yeah, I've heard also about ketamine. I think they just realized that administration of intravenous ketamine cures depression. So it's still Middle Ages. We're living in medical Middle Ages, and we're still relying on some patented corporate drugs that don't work. So, one dose of mushrooms is pretty much 4 years of psychotherapy and medication. So what are we doing?
Yeah, well, I do remember I had this extended conversation. Like, I went on a date with this girl who was a psychologist, and I tried to convince her that there was something valuable about psychedelics. I was particularly talking about ayahuasca, and it was very difficult to get through to her. She was like, well, you can do all that stuff with talk therapy. And I'm like, yeah, but how long does it take?
and it sometimes doesn't even get you a tiny fraction of the results. The first message that I got from magic mushrooms was they really wanted to show me what humans are. And I use the word humans in air quotes because apparently You familiar with the term NPC, non-playable character?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it. Yeah.
Exactly. So they've explained that humans are pretty much most of the planet, about 97 or 98% are NPCs. It's very difficult to know what they mean, but the first message from them a few years ago was that humans are very, and it was a really interesting juxtaposition. They showed me what humans look like. It was 4 tiny 8-bit squares, like squares on an 8-bit screen, like an Atari game. And then I asked, so what do you look like? And he said, I'm not sure I can show you. I said, I can take it, just show me. And they showed me that it showed me itself as if this was this giant being that is filling the whole universe, made of energy, love, and it was impossible to understand. It was really something out of this world. So yeah, that's humans. They don't have respect for humans. They showed me what we do to nature. They showed me many things. They showed me that we don't understand love. It's very complicated.
Right. Well, that was a key theme the first time I took ayahuasca, when the substance started to come on. The first vision I had was my ex-girlfriend. It was a memory of my ex-girlfriend asking me, why do you like me so much? Why do you love me so much? And I realized I never had a good answer. I could never explain fully why I cared about it the way I did and do. And ayahuasca said to me, yeah, see that? That means you don't understand anything about love, why it comes, where it comes, why it goes, why it ends. And I was like, oh, all right, you got me there.
Exactly. That's what I love about those entities, is that the funny thing is that when I started posting those videos and talking to people on Reddit, and it's quite intense because within 2 or 3 weeks I got like 100 subscribers, and it's really, people don't subscribe normally to stuff like that. They just basically just started clicking, and I got in contact with a lot of people who've had the same experiences. But the amount of disbelief and ridicule that you get from people, that's really mind-boggling, is that people don't really want to treat those experiences as something real. But when you have experiences like yours or mine, and when you know that this is not a product of your imagination, it's not something that could have come from the inside of your brain, you start realizing that there is something completely beyond our what we understand and what we think that the reality is. And then you realize that there's a whole other world filled with wisdom and things that we never thought of that needs to be explored. But yeah, I mean, images and messages like yours, the thing you get on ayahuasca, it's very humbling. Because the first thing, and also I've read this and I've heard from other people that this is one of the first messages they get when they get in contact with those entities, is that you know nothing and you're here to learn and listen. And that's what I really enjoy. I love learning, and they've been amazing teachers. They've taught me so much. They've absolutely changed my life with all the messages and all the information. And it's like having another life. I always say that my life will never be the same without my psychedelic experiences.
Yes. Well, I like to say that it's so important to treat these substances with respect, because they do have the power to literally change the course of your life. Like one night, one journey can actually change who you are, or lead you to ask these key questions, which will mean you'll never be the same.
No, of course. It's once you experience just this image of humans just being those stupid, insignificant dots, that made me completely humans. And then there was this experience where I was allowed to talk to trees. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, it turns out trees souls. They actually living beings, and I was lucky enough to actually get in contact with some of them. And then I found books about people who actually research this stuff, but it's outside of the psychedelic, the spectrum. It's basically people who
Like Cleve.
Like exactly. It was widely discredited and ridiculed, but there is now a German. I don't think he's a scientist, but he's someone who has been working as, I want to say tree surgeon, but it's not a tree surgeon. It's someone who deals with nature pretty much. He's been out there for like 40 years, and he has scientific proof. And we don't need to go far. We just need to talk about things like trees communicating when there's a fire at one part of the forest. The rest of the forest, for some reason, immediately folds the leaves. The trees fold the leaves, and this has been proven scientific.
They fold their leaves?
Yes, they do. This is something that people don't understand. They don't know how it's possible. But it's so against the mainstream knowledge that, you have the phrase tree-hugging hippie, right? It's basically whoever is in contact with those entities, it's automatically ridiculed. And it's because it goes against productivity of mass. You pretty much stop being a productive worker, and you become an independent, clearly thinking human being that is absolutely of no use to corporations. And they don't want that. They basically want you to be a slave to the system, be a slave to your own problems, your own fear. You're just, you're a vending machine to the corporations. But the thing that trees showed me is, for a moment, they let me look at the world the way they see it. And when you look outside your window and you look at all the streets and cars and lamps and everything, you see world. This is your world. And occasionally you'll see a tree, and you will see nature as something that interferes with human world. The way they showed it to me is they showed me that nature is the real world, and human bits, this technology, is pretty much a big interference and distortion of the real world, of their world. And that was very sobering. That was the moment when I realized how destructive it was. And to make it funnier, the thing that I was looking at was actually a gas station. And they showed me this as an evil arm of a like a giant robot that is here just to destroy and rape nature. I was never big on nature and stuff like that, but after that experience, I realized that we're like cancer on this planet. That's really, really sad.
Do you think that humans are really bad, like the emergence of intelligence that we have is bad, or is it just misdirected?
No, it's actually perfect. It's the way it should be. And this is one of my first questions to them was, why is there so much evil in life? And why are we so flawed? And they said, this is actually a sentence that someone else heard. I'm just repeating because it was very similar to what they showed me. They said, if you zoom out and you look at whatever, a city, a planet, whatever, do you see any evil? And they said, no, there's no evil. They said, yes. So the perception of evil is just the way you see it. Number one, everything's perfect the way it is, because if you want to learn love, that's, by the way, that's the only purpose why we're here. It's a love training device. They said, if everything was perfect and if the world was full of love, what would you learn? Nothing. So you need to struggle with issues. You need to struggle with problems and humanity. Number two, your understanding of what's good and bad only works in your world. If you go to our dimension, there's no distinction between bad and good. It's just something that you humans came up with. So they said not to think too much about it. They said, you're here for a reason, and the more difficult it is, the better it is for you, because it means there's a lot that you need to learn.
Several times I've referenced the movie Jacob's Ladder. Do you know?
No, never heard of it.
I guess I'll spoil it for some people out there. But the point of the movie is this guy, he comes back from war, and he's a veteran, like 10 years after leaving the army, and he starts seeing these demons all over the place, and it seems really nasty, and they're like trying to drag him down to hell or something like that. And eventually he realizes, or his chiropractor gives him some advice and says to him, you see these things as demons because they're trying to tear the parts of you which need to go. And so from his perspective, these things would seem evil, but they're really forces of good, or forces of nature, I suppose you'd say, forces of the universe, which are just trying to maintain a kind of natural order. But when you're in that moment, when you're in like a ego state of mind, or when you're focused on your possessions or, you know, your body or anything like that, these things can seem evil. They seem like they're doing bad, but they're just doing what they do.
Yes, this is a conclusion I came to years ago, that everything is just a matter of perspective. Because what if it turns out that this here is hell, that where we are is just a giant, I don't know, like a torture chamber? Because it is. People who had out-of-body experiences, who left their bodies and went out of this dimension, they come back crying back, because apparently it's very difficult to exist here. So look how different we would look at murderers, people who let you, you know, just let you go, who free you from this misery. That it's a, you know, it's an interesting perspective, but it shows you we take for granted is actually just an interpretation of an idea, because you don't know what it is, you don't know why you're here, you don't know what this thing, what purpose it has. So it's what Mushrooms said is very smart. I think you should go with everything that happens, and you should never take it's just your, you know, it's just the way you look at things, and everything's planned according to them, everything makes sense, and what we call evil is a necessary thing that needs to happen for us to learn whatever we need to learn.
Let's talk about the NPC thing again. So I was thinking about something related just before we started talking about reincarnation. Like maybe a lot of people in the world are very conformist because they have young souls, and maybe after you've lived a few lifetimes, you start to figure out what's really important, and then you say, well, you know, fitting in isn't really that important. It's other things like self-expression and love and joy and hope. What do you think? Do you think it's something to do with reincarnation, or is it just like, are these people just programs in a matrix?
Okay, well,
or what would you say?
You touched on two things. So first of them, reincarnation. It's again, it's one of those things that we came up with that tries to justify suffering and our existence. Well, the way Mushrooms presented it to me, they said, is that it's like having a building filled with rooms, and when you start a life here, it's basically like going to one of the rooms and taking a test. And you take a test, and once you're done, you leave the room, and that's when we think that we die. And the truth is that the way they showed me my this energy, they said it never dies. You just change the dimension. You basically leave the room. It's not that you die or reborn. No, you might never come back to this dimension, or you might if you fail the test. Or I don't know how it works. I don't have enough information. But the concept of life and death is very, very different after Mushrooms, and that's one of the reasons why they do the research now, because apparently it helps people who are about to die, people who are old or terminally ill. It helps them deal with this fact. Apparently, I think they came up with something like 70-80% of all the experiences on mushrooms being positive and having a very spiritual effect on a person, and it completely changes their attitude towards death. And I think it might have a lot to do with what I was shown, is that you basically never die. You're immortal. But it's nothing new. Religions have been telling us about this for millennia. We all know this. We forgot this. We ignore it, but that's apparently the truth. I also believe in that because my mom went through an out-of-body experience when she had, what was that? She had some kind of a drug administered when she had a surgery, and her heart stopped for 40 seconds. And of course, the usual. She went to the light, and then she saw the whole hospital. She visited other room within the hospital, the usual stuff. And if you're familiar with the book by Raymond Moody, Life After Life, he actually had a scientific approach to the whole thing, and he found out that there's 13 elements that are universal for every person who's ever experienced who's ever had an out-of-body experience. And he talked to people from New York Exchange stockbrokers to shamans in Amazon forest. So he talked to everybody, and irrespective of who he talked to, it was always the same story that always checks out. It's always the same 13 elements. So that there must be an element of truth to it. I always give everybody this example of they're called Myanmar children. There are children on an island in Myanmar who believe to be Japanese soldiers, and there's 20 or 25 of them. They all speak Japanese. They eat Japanese food. They have nothing to do with Japan. They are basically we could call it a reincarnation of some kind of a regiment. We don't know who they are, but they know that they were soldiers in previous life. And there's just so much proof now. Even if you go on YouTube, there's a boy in Scotland who described the life of another person 30 miles away from his home. The boy is 5, and to detail he describes his life, and then they went to that house 30 miles away, and it turns out that everything's true. So science like to ignore those things because they don't have an explanation for this, because it needs to be Newtonian physics, and everything that doesn't fit within that paradigm is being ignored or ridiculed. But the truth is that it's not what we think it is. And then the second thing you mentioned is Matrix. One of the first things they showed me is that this is a simulation, and this is I don't really understand how it works, but they did show me how to hack it. So that's actually it is complicated, because I don't understand everything that they tell me about. They don't even talk to me. They just telepathically upload me a bunch of stuff that I need to unpack and then process, and it takes weeks or months sometimes. And they told me at some point, they said, "There's so much information, we need to slow down, especially for you." And I said, "Thank you," because it was a headache. I was getting to a point that within 4 hours I was getting so much information that I couldn't sleep for weeks, because it's so profound and so logical that you realize that you're getting a first-hand information from some entities who, well, they said that they can tell me anything I want to know, and they do explain everything that I need to know. And that's one of the reasons why I started making videos, because I have so much information now that I need to share it with everybody.
When something is revealed to you on a psychedelic journey, or even in the meditations that happen afterwards, how skeptical are you of it? Or like, do you take the idea and say, well, let's look at this, how does it stand up to scrutiny, or where would I go from this? What could I build upon this? Or do you have a certain process to analyze the ideas?
No. So obviously I did start from thinking, wow, this is something that my brain is just creating. And that was first minutes of my first trip, because as soon as I started talking to them, this experience was so real and so flawless, and the information I was getting was so complicated that there was no way that you could. It's like having a sense of presence of somebody else in the room. It's exactly the same when they start talking to you. It's not it's something you've never experienced in your life. You just know that it's not you. So, of course, after the first experience, I started thinking I'm either crazy or this is legit. And I started questioning everything that I get, all the information. I started looking into it. So I started researching everything about religion, that kind of stuff. And obviously, everything they were telling me existed somewhere else already in our history, and it's not something that I know. So that was but always at the back of my head, I was thinking that's psychedelic drugs. That's something that I should always treat with a little bit of caution. But there was a moment when they said, "We'll let you now talk to somebody." They said, "You have a problem with understanding what you're experiencing, and we'll help you." And they let me talk to dead family members, and they told me things that happened before my birth. And then I went back to my other family members and asked them about this, and they all started crying, all this kind of stuff. They said, "How do you know this?" And that was the moment when I realized that this is real. This is not something that I'm making up. And from that moment on, I stopped questioning. So anything they tell me, I know that it's true. I know that it's real. There hasn't been, in years, there was not a single piece of information that could discredit the validity of the whole experience. It hasn't happened. Everything they tell me is not only true, but it's also so smart. Like, I have problems that I've been dealing with for years, for decades, and they give me a sentence that is made of 3 or 4 words, and it's a perfect solution to the problem. And I think you like
Right.
this example with your ayahuasca girlfriend. That's how it works. So
Yeah.
no, that anymore. And they actually, not so interesting, they actually give me information through other people. So when there's a moment when I stop listening to them, they'll go to somebody else who has a psychedelic experience, and they'll pass on a message to me. And those people come back to me saying, this is what they wanted to tell you. As soon as I hear the language that they use, because they use a very specific syntax in the sentence. It's to the point, no emotional stuff. Like, we use a lot of ego. We put a lot of ego into our language. They don't. They basically give you just words, and as soon as you hear this language, I know that it's a message from them. It's just basically very different structure to what a person would normally use.
Yes. I call that being a conduit, and I felt it sometimes too. Like I remember it must have been a couple of months after my first ayahuasca trip, and I was talking to my friend, and all of a sudden we were talking about her relationship with her mom and why she didn't want to have children in the future, and suddenly I asked these very pointed questions, and suddenly she was crying, and I was like, whoa, somehow I just revealed, or whatever was working through me just revealed this trauma so it could be healed. And it was very, very powerful and very unusual experience.
Yes, that's a part of it. I'm actually making a video now. I will upload it today. It's called "Why Are Magic Mushrooms Magic?" And I want to address those things, that everything that happens is so out of ordinary and so unusual that you cannot live a normal life after that. That's one of the reasons why most of them are illegal. It's because it changes you on such a fundamental level that you just stop being who you are. I mean, there's a lot of people who become suicide after taking that. That's one of the, I want to make a video about this.
Yes.
Why are psychedelics so dangerous? And one of the reasons would be that you end the life that you've had. Obviously, it's not everybody experiences it. There's people who don't change, but many people visit those other dimensions, get in contact with those entities, and it changes them in a way that they cannot go back to their old life because they realize it's made of bullshit. It's just lies and ego, and that's a real danger because I'm a different person than the rest of people. I know I've always had this problem. I'm just different. I think differently, but I'm used to being rejected, being ridiculed. That's normal for me. But someone who's not used to this, when they experience something like this, that's a very serious and difficult situation because you will find yourself in a whole new world that you're not prepared for.
One of the reasons I asked that question about analyzing the data that you receive is related to mental illness. So when I was 17, I had this experience which it revealed this truth to me about what was possible in the universe. But afterwards, I started going too far with it. Like, it was like some thought would pop into my head, I'd think something, and I'd take it as absolute truth. And that was a very bad, well, that wasn't a beneficial way for me to deal with it, because I basically became delusional. It was like I was building all these fantastic worlds within my mind, thinking that they were coming from some higher source, but I was mistaken. It was just my own ego construction. So do you think there's a risk when people take psychedelics that they'll confuse the voice of deeper knowledge for their own, little fantasies?
No, because even in your case, you don't know if it was your ego or whether it was something trying to communicate with you. See, the problem with our consciousness is that, no, it's not a matter of consciousness, it's basically our ego. Ego is the problem because we're born to a life that is made of lies, and then we start treating them as truths, because discovering yourself and the truth is hard work. That's really, really difficult. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of ability to self-criticize yourself, to face your own demons. People don't want that. People are very, very lazy and very, very scared. So for someone to go through this and then reject it, I would say that's a very natural reaction, because it's easier just going, oh, it's just my ego or me being crazy or whatever, rather than going, there's something happening that I don't understand. I need to research it. Because if you start doing that, you start discovering a whole new world of people who actually have answers. That's the thing. We don't live in the unknown. We already have the answers. We've had them for a very long time. We just tend to gravitate towards things that are easy to digest, like pop culture or working 8 hours a day, 9 to 5. That's easy. That's simple. And then you complain about a life that you don't really live, and you get to be 80 and you just die because it's simple. It doesn't take much. But what if it turns out that this life is actually something very valuable, that you win in an interdimensional lottery, that it's only a few chosen ones who can take part in it? What then? What do you do when you come here? What do you spend your life on? Basically just eating McDonald's and watching Wheel of Fortune. That's ridiculous. It's a waste of existence.
I was going to ask you, I guess you kind of already answered this. These entities, you do think they're not something within us, like not in the normal way we'd think about it. Like they're not just constructs of our imagination. They are, but would you say they're external to us, or would you say it's more like there's no gap between what's external and internal?
Right. No, because they not. See, the problem with all those messages and all this information that you get from them is that it's being telepathically uploaded to your brain, and it's not really using the normal communication channels, human communication channels. So you get a bunch of concepts and ideas that are not translatable to human language. But if I'll do a bad job at it, but I'll try to explain what they said. Is obviously everybody who's doing anything related to spirituality knows that there's one consciousness. We're all one. We're a part of something much bigger. So when you talk about things like them being external or internal, it's not like that. It's all on the same plane of existence, on one consciousness, one dimension, and then we basically just have this reality, which is, as I said, a tiny testing room in which we exist just for the purpose of this particular experience, which in this case is love. And it's not that we're internal, external. No, we all together in it, but we decided that we'll only choose to see the things that are tangible, that are, things that are material. We just concentrate on this. And they say very often that whatever you concentrate on, that's the reality you create with your own mind. So once you open up your mind to new concepts and new ideas, you'll start seeing those things. Like my video, the 434, the synchronicity. It's not synchronicity. It's just basically they told me, it's like, dude, we're talking to you all the time. And because my question was, what is it? And they go, it's us. Like we're banging on the door of your this simulated reality chamber. We're telling you, just be happy, be relaxed, because you're here to experience a lot of things. It's my personal thing. It's basically me being very negative. I have 20 years of depression behind me, that kind of stuff. And they said it's like, listen, it's us talking to you. And as soon as I heard that, I started accepting this as their attempts to communicate with me. And that totally changed my reality, because those numbers started appearing everywhere, every hour. It used to be once a week, but then it just exploded. It was everywhere. And it's not just that. Once you start doing this, you'll realize that this is how reality works. There's this book by Rhonda Byrne. It's called Secret. I mean, everyone probably knows Secret. This idea that there's this idea that you can create a reality with your thought. It's not really true, because that's the reason why it doesn't work. This is why it causes it caused so much confusion because it's not really your thought. These are emotions that actually govern your reality. So you use your emotions to choose the reality you want to live in. Obviously, if you're negative, that will be the reality that you will be in, and everything will be external. It will be you and them. But when it's loving and it's positive, it will be all one. All will be the same thing. You start seeing that. You just start realizing that that everything's connected. Once you see those connections, you start realizing that there's no real distinction between me and other humans or other animals. And then if you get on the spiritual path, you realize that there's more. There's nature that's connected to you. There's other entities, like people call them angels, whatever. Once you start seeing those things, you start understanding that it's much more complex, and there's no real distinction between things. It's one consciousness that wants to experience itself by interacting with itself. It's a very interesting concept.
We were talking about knowledge and how this kind of knowledge isn't really accepted in the mainstream. So a lot of people, when they hear that you've received some knowledge through using psychedelics or through meditation, they'd probably dismiss that. A lot of people today are focused on science, and some people even are very strong advocates of this, and they say it's like a religious thing. They say the only path to knowledge is science, which I definitely don't agree with, but some people believe that. Do you think there'll come a time when it's more accepted that these are legitimate paths to knowledge, like revelation is a legitimate path to knowledge and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we're still in Middle Ages. I'm absolutely shocked about the state of our knowledge, our medicine. It's archaic. It's really, really primitive. And we need to start accepting other explanations for things, because what we have now makes zero sense. What we believe in, things like evolution or anything else, it's a fairy tale. Everything's made up, and when you try to look up the definition of it, you'll be like, oh, we don't know. We just don't know. I mean, we don't have to go as far as trying to find the source of gravity, that keeps you on this surface, whatever it is. You'll be like, oh, we don't really know. We have no explanation. What's more interesting, every law of physics that we use is actually against the commonly accepted theories about gravity. And you cannot be stupid forever. It's sooner or later people will start asking questions. And this is one of the reasons why people just start waking up. It's been only 20 years that we've had the internet, but it's been probably the most significant 20 years in terms of intellectual freedom that we've ever had in the history of humankind. And you cannot live a life where you don't know where you came from. You don't know why you're here, and you don't know where you're going to. And the only thing you know is that you need to work and you need to die. Those are the only two things that the establishment wants you to be completely sure of. That makes no sense. And also, we're getting to a point where technology allows us to stop working. Like we already at this point. We're not doing this because there are huge, there are people who basically want to profit from our stupidity. But it's not going to last for a long time. It's we already have the technology to communicate with each other and to create new things. We have things that will completely change our lives within the next few decades. So it's only a question how much resistance there will be from humans, from those who already who woke up. I don't like to use this word, but people who already know that this is not what it is. It only depends how much resistance there will be from them. And I think our numbers are growing. People are realizing that you cannot live a life that you lived 50 years ago. This financially, it doesn't work in terms of your energy and finances. It makes zero sense. Something has to change. And the answer, and everyone knows this, the answer is not in the establishment's dogma. It's this type of science, the quote mark science, because not really science, it's just religion. things like evolution are religion, because they ignore all the facts, all the scientific and logical facts about the origin of humans on this planet. And they give you something that makes zero sense. Like, they give you an idea of humans just evolving from a bacteria that there's not a single person on this planet that can explain how it's possible. There's no a reaction or a process that can explain it. It's just physically not possible. So we will have to wake up. If you want to live a good life, you just have to start believing in things that seem to be ridiculous at the moment. Of course, they seem to be ridiculous because that's the easiest explanation. It's just ridiculous. If you ridicule it, if there's something you ridicule, you basically negate it. And once you negate it, then you basically can go back to your own fairy tales. It's, we all love our fairy tales. That's why girls love unicorn t-shirts and that kind of stuff, because we all, I mean, even look at a credit card. What is a credit card? That's a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale that tells you that you can afford something that you cannot, and it's the foundation, the financial foundation of our society. Credit is the reason why we have money. Money is debt. So we all live in a fairy tale of finances that we cannot afford, and it's just the basic stuff. I'm not talking about anything else, like your health, your food, everything else. We live a fake life. It's plastic, and it starts from your body and it ends on your mind. Your mind is made of plastic, because you know nothing about yourself. You know nothing about this world, but you're very, very quick to ridicule and judge everybody else who has some sort of idea what it's about.
Yeah. Well, about that evolution thing. So I have my doubts about this neo-Darwinistic model of evolution as well. But do you have an idea of how humans came to be on Earth, or you just think that
No, of course. Well, the thing is that your knowledge it's your property. You need to take care of it. You cannot rely on schools or anything else, because it's it's nonsense. So as soon as you open your mind and you, of course it is. It's someone's making money on you. Your ideas are not yours. If you go through 20 years of education and you come out of it saying, I know something, it means that they successfully brainwashed you, because you should get out after those 20 years and realize, oh, that's a bunch of lies. It makes zero sense. And that's a healthy reaction. You should know that it's nonsense. There are scientists who know about the truth about the origin of humans, and they don't say anything because they'll immediately lose tenures, they'll be ridiculed, they'll lose their jobs, because you need to follow the mantra. Of course, I mean, this is the scary part, is that it doesn't take a genius to actually look at your body and go, where's the proof for that to be a result of an evolutionary process that doesn't exist anywhere else in nature? Like, there is nothing that proves that this is a result of evolution. There is no evolution. It doesn't exist anywhere. The only thing they use is changing colors of some bugs, which is a feature that is supposed to change when you mutate it, or the length of wings on fruit flies, that kind of stuff. It makes zero sense. There's no transitional example of a one species or one organism changing into another organism. It just doesn't exist, never did, and never will. It's a fairy tale. So it's everything points toward intelligent design, and it doesn't take much to actually look at yourself and go, oh, not only were we intelligently designed, but also it was a really, really crappy job. I mean, we have because we have 4,000 DNA errors that cause diseases. And to make things funnier, there's this guy, I don't know if you know him, Greg Barden. Well, it's not just him. There are people who have been dealing with human DNA. There's Bruce Lipton. There are geneticists who basically they've studied human genome. They know what they're talking about, and they don't even bother trying to go mainstream with this, because they know the type of resistance they will encounter. So they only keep it to themselves. Occasionally they'll publish a book, which is usually put in the sci-fi section in libraries and bookstores. Yeah, there are scientific things that will make you realize that you're just a dumb person who's just going to school thinking that they teach you something, and they're just indoctrinating you to be an obedient worker. So it's a very sad revelation. Once you wake up and you realize that everything you know is a lie.
Yeah, well, it's a sad revelation, but it's also
a sad
a liberating one, because it's like, so I can build my own thing.
Yes, but what are you being liberated from? Well, you're being liberated from everything. You're being liberated from your family, your friends, your family. Everything that you're made of is gone. Once you wake up, and it's not a quick, obviously it takes years. For me, it's been 15 years and I'm still learning, but it is a very, very difficult thing, because you're left on your own. You're alone in this world. There's not many people. People like us are not really a part of this society. 99% of people they're asleep, and you're not a part of this anymore. Once you wake up, you're in an empty room where there's some people, but you need to find them. And one of the reasons why I decided to start making videos is because mushrooms told me, they said, your job is to find like-minded people and build a network. And once you do this, we'll tell you what the next step will be, because we have a job here to do, and you need to help us. But it's been only a few weeks, and it's been absolutely amazing. Having the ability to speak to people who know what I know, it's just, there's nothing else. We should live like this. We should always connect with like-minded people, but you're not allowed to. I mean, you go to an office, you work in an office. Who do you sit next to? People who have nothing in common with you. People you wouldn't even say hello to on the street, right? Yeah. It's just a random person, and that's how you spend your life. Very often, your family members, even your own spouse, they're very often strangers, because you connect, you match based on attractiveness that has absolutely nothing to do with what you want from life. It's not what you need. Most people are they're strangers in their own house, because they live with people who have nothing in common with, other than having children or whatever. It's all very sad, because we waste this existence on nonsense. We waste we waste this life on fear, on ego, on believing in things that are not true, and it needs to change. It's just as I said, if it turns out that you come here for a purpose, for a reason, and you do nothing about this, that's a huge waste of existence.
Yeah. Or to phrase it another way, it's a huge opportunity when we're here on Earth to do something amazing with our lives, right?
Yes, and it takes a lot of courage. You need to be a very courageous person. You need to have the guts to actually stand in front of it. I mean, look in the mirror and say, there's no other way. I cannot keep pretending that what I see and what I hear is not real. Because once you have those experiences with be it ayahuasca, DMT, or magic mushrooms, it's very difficult to go back to the old thinking, just going, oh, it's not true, it's just my brain, it's just... And I know people who spend their whole lives fighting. They just fight to keep this illusion, this imaginary world, and for everything they have, they put into this world to make sure that they never look outside, because they know that they rather live a life than spend time and energy on this scary truth that everything you know is fake and everything you are is fake. That's an act of courage. That's something that you need to be a brave person, pretty much.
Let me ask you, how often do you take magic mushrooms?
Oh, not that often. I would say a few times a year. It's not easy. That's one thing. Yes. You don't always have access. The other thing is that at this stage, the amount of information that I get is so... This is what I do. When I get a chance to take mushrooms, I sit in the darkness for between 4 and 8 hours, depending on the dose, and with my phone, and I just record everything that they tell me. So you can imagine after a trip like that, you have a phone, not full of messages, but they're actually only keywords, like little chapter titles to
little hints,
to huge just book chapters in your head. So you need not only to write it down, but also to process the whole thing and then translate it into a language that other people will understand. it takes weeks,
Yes.
between weeks and months sometimes. So there are things that
I've got a few things which I think I still need to go back from years ago and still put pieces together.
But it gets worse, because with every message that you get more knowledge and more connections. So every time you learn something new, you go back and you realize that what you learned a long time ago actually has now a completely new meaning, because you can connect it now to what you've learned today. It's a mess. It's so, I've discovered it recently, because this whole thing intensifies. It's getting more and more complicated, and then it starts connecting to things that happened to me in the past. It's becoming this big puzzle that starts moving. It's not stable. It keeps moving, and it grows. So it gets to a point where you're realizing that not only is it complicated, but also it changes all the time, and you realize that it's never going to be stable, and yet you will grow until you die. And this is quite difficult. It is, because we all want to have some sense of stability in terms of our lives, our knowledge, emotions, whatever. It's impossible when you do it with mushrooms. The first thing they tell you is that, boy, brace yourself, because this is gonna be a ride. And I mean, you're probably familiar with Bill Hicks and his one of his famous speeches, "Just a ride." That's what it is. You pretty much get on this thing, and then you go in the unknown. You have no idea where you're going to end up. But this journey takes whole lifetime. Once you wake up and you realize that there's a whole world of knowledge hidden from you, you just start discovering everything, and it all changes. It creates a whole new world, because nothing is as it was. Nothing is the same. And you need to find your place in this new world, but it's not stable. Once you sit down, there's something else calling you, and you're like, okay, I have to get up and I'll go somewhere else. And you keep doing this until you realize that you can build a car now, and now you can drive to places. That's how I see it. It's just you're just changing a method of transport. The more knowledge you have, the more skills you have to build a different type of transportation. And it just becomes, I'm waiting to build some kind of a time machine. That's the stage that I'm at now.
Serious?
Well, no, I'm joking.
Are you saying that literally?
No, it's a metaphor, because I started from walking, and now I'm basically just using a jet engine, but it might be still walking. I don't know. It's the speed at which I'm getting the messages, and the amount of messages that I'm getting. It's crazy. It's really, on purpose sometimes I'm just saying I'm not going to do this for the next few months, or at least half a year, because I know the next time I'll do it, it will be just too much. And there are some things that are really too much. I lost a family member recently due to a heart attack, and I was allowed to talk to them, and that was such a profound experience, such a deep experience, that you start to re-evaluate everything that you know about the person. So you have family members who are connected to them. You start talking to them. You start changing the way you feel about death and everything else. It's not just knowledge. It's just who you are, is your beliefs, your emotions. All of this is being turned upside down every time you get information like this. Like, he talked to me only for a few seconds, but he told me a few things that made me go, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. I need to take care of those people who he left behind. And there's a lot of things that I need to do, and it creates a whole new process and a lot of steps that you need to take to get to a new place. And once you get to that place, you realize that everything has changed now, and that there's more stuff. So why would you want to have another trip to find out that there's even more stuff? You just want to take a break from this. The more I learn, I used to do it every month, and now I don't want to, because it's too scary. You cannot undergo changes all the time, because there's nothing left in you that you can be certain of. You just wake up every day thinking, who am I? What is it that is going to hit me today? It's very difficult.
Yes. Well, here's something I wonder about. What am I going to look like, or what kind of person am I going to be when I'm old, like in 40, 50 years' time, having all these changes, and some of them quite radical, and many of them unforeseeable changes in character or in direction of my life. It's hard for me to imagine, but I try to think about it. Like, obviously, I think I'll be a more loving person, probably an even more open-minded person, or at least I hope so. Do you have any idea what like where this is ultimately going, or what kind of person you'll be?
No, of course not. But because of all
No.
those experiences, I learned one thing, that you just need to keep your mind open. And one of the messages I got from mushrooms is that they always say, just go with the flow, because they always have a problem with me resisting. Like, first I resisted the validity of knowledge that they were providing me with. They were telling me, this is what you need to do, this is what's going to happen, to a point where they told me that I'm going to lose a job, and I told them that's not true, and I did lose the job. This is how serious they were about stuff. They said in 2 months they're going to kick you out, and I was like, whatever. And they fired me after 2 months, and that was the one was like, I better listen to them. So that actually happened. But the thing is that they know things that you don't know, and they can show. Well, first of all, they show you who you were. One of the messages they told me is that you are made of experiences that happened 20 years ago. And it's true. They pulled those experiences from my life. They showed me things that I didn't remember. And they said, this is what made you. This is who you are today. You have this vast of experiences that you were every day, but it's not you. You're not this person. And once I realized that I'm living a lie, that I'm made of things that don't exist anymore, like I'm using Peter's fast that doesn't exist. This Peter is gone. I mean, that Peter is gone. This Peter exists now, but I don't know him. Like, I don't know who he is. And one of the things that mushrooms do is they let you, it's called ego death. So it allows you to see yourself without ego. And turns out ego absolutely distorts your perception of everything. Like, even when you use your language, I already mentioned that, I write a lot. So when I use the language, they said, we're going to switch off ego now to show you what you're doing. They switched it off, and it turns out that I started using a completely different language that was not trying to make me look good in other people's eyes. So once they made me realize that I'm made of this nonsense, this earthly and bodily functions, I realized that I don't know who I am. So why would how can I have any idea about who I'm going to be in a few months or years? Because I've changed completely. I've changed every single aspect of my life. And it's not just mushrooms. This is pretty much, it goes with, it comes with age, with experiences. You don't change only if you think that you know everything, or when you think that who you are is who you are. And you put on hold, and you just preserve that. You put it in a nice bag, you put it in a fridge, and then you stand outside looking at this thing. And that's how most people live their lives. They just think that who they are is who they are. And it is true. Like, my mother has been the same person for the last 40 years. I've known her 40 years, and she is the same person. And my problem with her is that she has no clue what real life is about. And I can see her drift deeper into those layers of illusion that is slowly is starting to deteriorate her life. That's what happens to most people. Like, if you believe in illusion, this illusion will turn on you and will destroy you, because you need to be in the real world. You need to know who you are. You know what your weaknesses are. You need to know what you're made of, what your strengths are. No one knows this. No one takes the time to actually try to discover who they are, what they want to do, and what they should become. So no, I keep my mind open, just saying I'm just interested in who I'm gonna be after the next trip. That's the only thing I'm interested in.
Okay. Yeah. I think I'll have to wrap it up there, Peter. But thanks so much. It's so interesting to talk to you.
My pleasure. It was really nice talking to you. I'm really glad that there are people who are interested in my experiences. I hope that people will actually have a chance to benefit from it.
Yeah, I think they will. I'm going to keep sharing your videos around because I love them. They're fascinating, and they get my brain start lighting up in different areas and stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It will get more interesting, I promise. At the moment, I'm just starting. It's just an introduction, but it will get weirder and more interesting.
Great. Well, I hope to talk to you again. Have a great
Of course,
evening.
we can do it again. And
Sweet.
you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Remember to check out Peter's channel 434. Now, it's not always easy to find when you're searching on YouTube, so check the link in the description and you'll be able to find it. Thanks so much. Take care. Love one another and be cool.